The topic of the beginning of Masechtas Menachos is the same as the topic of the beginning of Masechtas Vachim, and it's the halachos of Shaloi Lishma. When a machshava Shaloi Lishma has an impact on a carbon, when it's going to be kosher, ela shaloi olu l'baylam l'shem chayva, when it's going to be pasul, etc., etc., etc. One of the chedushim that is mavur in the beginning of Masechtas Menachos and the beginning of Masechtas Vachim as well is that in addition to the fact that a machshava Shaloi Lishma has a negative impact on a carbon, it's also asr. It's also prohibited for a person to have a machshava Shaloi Lishma. Where do you see that? So it was mefurish in the Gemara. I mean, literally, it's from the first halachas of Masechtas Vachim and Masechtas Menachos, right? Reading from Menachos. Why did the Mishnah say what it should have said was said the Gemara. You want to know why the Mishnah said Ella? It's coming to teach me that right? It's coming to teach me that the mincha itself, despite the fact that it's like Olu l'bayim l'shem chayv is kosher, the asur lishnuye, and therefore moving forward, it would be asur to now, by one of the subsequent avodas, have a machshava Shaloi Lishma. Kidei Rava, and it's based on something Rava said. The Amar Rava Oila sheshachta Shaloi Lishma asur lizrek dama Shaloi Lishma. So it's mefurish in the Gemara that the idea of Shaloi Lishma is not only davar hapiseles, it's also a question of issa v'heter. It is prohibited, it's forbidden for a person to have a machshava Shaloi Lishma while he's doing one of the critical avodas. If you take a look at Rashi on the top of Daf Beis Amud Beis, Rashi says that what's the makar that it's asur lishnuye? What's the makar that you're not allowed to have a machshava Shaloi Lishma? Rashi says because it says im zevach shlomim karbanoi, and we learn from there shetehei zvich l'shem shlom. Now, im zevach shlomim karbanoi, the Torah says in the parish of Shlomim, that's the way the Torah introduces the Shlomim, and the Gemara learns in the first parak of Masechtas Vachim and all the limudim that teach me how I know there's a din lishma. We learn from im zevach shlomim shetehei zvich l'shem shlomim. So Rashi says you want to know why it's asur lishnuye, why there's an idea that it's prohibited for a person to do an avodah with a carbon with a machshava Shaloi Lishma. It's because it says im zevach shlomim karbanoi shetei zvicha l'shem shlomim, and that shetei zvicha l'shem shlomim is like a tzivoy. Torah is telling you how you're supposed to do it, and therefore you have to make sure that the zvicha is going to be l'shem shlomim. Meaning the parsha that tells me that Shaloi Lishma has a negative impact on a carbon is good for the makar that it's also to do an avodah Shaloi Lishma. If you take a look at Rashi on the identical Gemara in Masechtas Vachim Daf Beis Amud Beis, so Rashi over there says that you want to know why you can't have a machshava Shaloi Lishma when it comes to Zvachim, because ha'amrina beperik sheni, because the Gemara says in the second parak of Masechtas Zvachim, asur lechashev bekotshim. You're not allowed to have a machshava apeiselis bekotshim v'yalef mikra, and it's learned out from a pasuk dechsiv lo yichashev. It says in the Torah lo yichashev. What's this Gemara in the second parak of Zvachim the Rashi is referring to? So the Gemara says Amar Rabbi Minay lemachashev bekotshim shu loika. How do you know that if somebody would have a machshava apeiselis bekotshim he would get Malchus? Talmud Loimer, it says in the Torah lo yichashev, and being that it says lo yichashev, that's a loisase to teach me that if you have a machshava peiselis bekotshim, you're going to get Malchus. So Rav Ashi told Ramari, if you have a machshava peiselis, a bad thought, you're going to get Malchus. Lav she'ein by maisahu v'chol lav she'ein by maisa ain't loikin olav. Isn't this a lav she'ein by maisa? So he told him back, true Rabbi Yehudi, when I said you're going to get Malchus, I meant that I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. The Amaru holds lav she'ein by maisa loikin olav. You want to know why asur lishnuye? You want to know why you're not allowed to have a bad machshava on a kosher carbon? It's because of a mefurish Gemara. It says in the Torah lo yichashev, and mean that it says lo yichashev, we learn minay lemachashev bekotshim shehu loika. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you would even get Malchus because he holds lav she'ein b'maisa. Loikanov. The bottom line is that's why you can't have a bad machshava. In other words, we seem to have two Rashis in Shas on the very, very same Gemara that is being mefarish this Gemara in two completely different ways. Rashi in Menachos says that you want to know why you can't have a machshava shaloi l'shma by kachim. It's because there's a din l'shma. So if there's a din l'shma, obviously you can't think shaloi l'shma. It says in Zevach Shlomim Karbonoi Shetehei Zvicha L'Shem Shlomim. Rashi in Zvachim says sharper. Rashi says because there's a loisase. It says in the Torah Lo Yichashev. Like Rabbi Yehuda that you get Malchus on a lav shem emaisa. This is even one of the chayvei lavin. Chayra at first glance, tzarich beer. Why Rashi in Zvachim was mefarish one way, Rashi in Menachos was mefarish the other way. And really, I think if you're going to ask the kasha properly, the kasha is more on Rashi in Menachos than on Rashi in Zvachim. Rashi in Zvachim is saying that you want to know why asur l'shnuye. It's because it's one of the lavin in the Torah. It says Lo Yichashev. L'chayra, why did Rashi in Menachos not learn the way that Rashi in Zvachim learns? So I think maybe we could be matzia two very simple pshatim to explain Rashi and Menachos Tabezam and Beis, which is we're going to see is going to go to the core of understanding some of the sugyas of Shaloi Lishma, and it's all based on dvarim from the Gedolei Achrayim, and that is the Rambam in Hilchos Psuli HaMikdashim. This is in Perek Yud Ches Halacha Aleph. The Rambam says, Kol HaMechashev Machshava She'eina Nechayna. Any person that thinks a machshava she'eina nechayna b'katcha. Hareza over b'loisase. He's over a loisase. Shaharehu omer lo yichashev. Because it says lo yichashev, and lo yichashev is a loisase that's coming to teach me you're not allowed to have a machshava hapoiseles. What's the makar to this Rambam? It's the Gemara in Zvachim Daf Chof Tes Amud Beis. Pi Shmuel Amdu says the Rambam. We have a Mesorah shebechlal din zeh that included in the words lo yichashev is shelo yafsid hakatcha b'machshava, that you shouldn't ruin the kachim with a bad thought. Says the Rambam, you know why? Because if a person would do an avodah on kachim and he would do it with a machshava apiseles, it would be the equivalent thereof to being mato mum bekachim. And it's for that reason this is not something that's okay. And then the Rambam goes on and on and on. Ramei Simcha or Sameach says that it's so interesting why the Rambam would go and give like an explanation, almost like a time of the Kra, for why there's a lav in the Torah of Lo Yichashev. The Rambam says if you have a machshava, Eina Nechayna B'Kachim, you get Malchus says Lo Yichashev. And then the Rambam gives an explanation. Sharezet doimel amatul b'm b'kachim. What shayches? I mean, whatever. You want to tell me it's like being matumum b'kachim? It's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, you're not allowed to have a machshava she'eina nechayna because it says in the Torah lo yichashev. Vos artmir, this very fancy reason, sharei doimel, like why is this something that even matters? L'chayra, at first glance, it's something that's neither here nor there. And befrat, Ramei Simcha says, it's mamish not darkei shal Rambam to ever do something like this in his Yad Chazaka. Maybe in the Meir Nevoichin, but not in the Yad Chazaka. So, Ramei Simcha, what did the Rambam mean when he said sharei doimel amatum u'mekachim? So, Ramei Simcha said, he says the Rambam with those words was coming to teach me a halacha. You know what he was coming to say? That although it's true, but the only time that's true is if the machshava is going to make the carbon puzzle. But what would be if someone had a machshava she'ena b'chayna b'katchin? But the halacha is that the carbon's going to be kosher. For example, kol azvachim shenizbachu shaloi l'shman ksherim elo shaloi alo l'bayim l'shem chayva. Those zvachim are all kosher. Said the Arsameach that b'lishoyna yazav, the Rambam was coming to teach you, in that case you would not be over the loisaseh of lo yichashev. Because the only time this in this lo yichashev is if it's doimel and matal b'mekachim, where you were mafsed the kachim on the level you can't eat the basar, you can't eat the shirayim, you can't be makta the dam, you can't be makta the koimitz. In a situation like that, said Dar Samech, that's what the Rambam is coming to teach you. It's there and only there that you're going to be over the lav of Lo Yichashev. But if somebody would be mechashev a machshava shaloi l'shma by kol azvachim, where the halach is it's going to be kosher, even though it's le'alu l'bayim l'shem chayva, which means your machshava was a machshava she'eina nechayna. It had a negative impact on the carbon. But afilu hachi, the lav of Lo Yichashev, that's not something that you're going to be over. The Rambam wasn't just giving a mashal, some beispiel. What the Rambam was coming to do was the Rambam was coming to say a chiddush lahalacha that if somebody would have a machshava shaloi l'shma by shar kachim, the halacha is he would not be over the lav of lo yichashev. I found in the shiurim from Rav Meshulam David Alevi, it's from the first shiurim on Masechtas Zvachim, he clears this shayla that we know there's a lav in the Torah of lo yichashev. Yesh lehistapek. If the lav of lo yichashev is something that would be true only by a Pesach and a Chatas, or in the world of Menachis, by a Minchas Chayte and a Minchas Kanos, like Rav, maybe a Minchas Omer. But the bottom line is that is it only then where it's actually possible that you're over the lav of lo yichashev, but where it's kosher, elish lo yolu l'bayim l'shem chayva, maybe not. Or maybe not. Maybe once you have a machshava shaloi l'shma, I don't care if it's puzzle, I don't care if it's kosher. At the end of the day, even when it's kosher, you see you were mafsid the kachem. It's like olul bailam l'shem chayv. On some level, it's not perfect. And if that's the case, maybe b'chai gavno, you'd be over the lav lo yichashev as well. So Mishulm David said it's a mefurish Tosefta. This Tosefta is in Perek Yud Beis in Masechtas Vachim. It's the very, very last excerpt of Halacha Chesed, the last Tosefta of Perek Yud Beis. Just going to read it. Aval HaKoimitz v'hamekabel v'hamahalech Kibel Hazar, Kibel Apostle, Kibel B'Smoili, Kibel B'Klichoil, Nosen Es Anitano Lamato, Lamailo Ves Anitano Lamato Lamato, Es Anitano B'Fnim, B'Chutz Ves Anitano B'Chutz B'Fnim. We're listing off a whole bunch of examples where a kohen did the avodah and he did it ba'ofen psul. Oishe shachton chutz lezmanon v'chutz l'mkoimon, or ha'pesach v'ha'chatos sheshachton shaloi l'shma harei elu b'loisaseh. In all these cases, you're going to be over loisaseh. Said Rabbi Shalom David Alevi, it's a mefurish Tosefta. In the Tosefta, you see that dafka the pesach and the chatos shaloi l'shma. It's dafka there you're going to be over the lav of lo yichashev. But as it relates to the zvachim with halachas, it's kosher. There you're not going to be over the lav of lo yichashev. But al kaponim, it's mavur over here, a very big chiddush. Ramei Simcha learned it up in the Rambam Perek Yud Ches Aleph. Ramei Shalom David Alevi said it's be'etzem a mefurish Tosefta, and that is the lav of lo yichashev. Do you have the lav of lo yichashev when you're dealing with karbonos that are kosher, where the machshava was done shaloi l'shma, or is it only the pesach and the chatos, or the minchas chayte and the minchas kanois, where it's actually going to be puzzle? Because when you mafsid the kachim, now the kachim is puzzle, so then you have the lav of lo yichashev. But to the extent that you weren't mafsid the kachim, maybe over there not. But al kaponim lefize yesh shloima, that's pshat and Rashi Masechtas Menachos. Over here we're discussing kol hamenachos shenik mitzu shaloi l'shman. What does it mean? That even though it's so you would have had a solka daitach that maybe what? Maybe you can go ahead now and maybe you could go and maybe you could have a machshava shaloi l'shma. Kamash malon asur l'shnuya. You can have a machshava shaloi l'shma. But what type of karbanos are we talking about? We're talking about karbanos that by definition are kosher v'lo yolu b'ayim l'shem chayva. We're not talking about the Pesach and the Chatas. We're not talking about the minchas chayte and the minchas kanois, because those things would have been possible anyways. So we're talking about something that's bab and edab and adafa. We're talking about something that could be kosher, right? So if we're talking about something that's kosher and now it's mavur in the Gemara asur l'shnuya, Rashi couldn't say asur l'shnuya al tzlo yichashev. And the reason is, like Ramei Simcha was medayik in the Rambam, like Rabbi Shalom David Alevi was medayik in the Tosefta, so Perek Yud Beis of Masechtas Vachim. Because the only time you have the lav of lo yichashev is by the Pesach and the Chatas. Zok Rashi Menachos da Beis on the Beis. You want to know why asur l'shnuya on such a carbon? Oh, the reason is because v'aksivim zevach shlomim karbonoi shetezvicha l'shem shlomim. If we were handling over here a Pesach and a Chatas, or a minchas chayte and a minchas kanois, and there the Gemara was saying asur l'shnuya, Avad Rashi would have said al tzlo yichashev. But we're discussing the kol hazvachim, the kol hamenachos that are ksheros elo shlo yolu l'bayim l'shem chayva, and that the diak of the mission is coming to teach me that afilu achi asur l'shnuya. It's still going to be something that you're not allowed to do. Over there, you don't have the isser of lo yichashev. What is then the siba? The siba is shetezvich l'shem shlomim. I Rashi in zvachim. I hear Rashi in zvachim. Obviously, also there is a lo yichashev. But the bottom line is this chiddush or Ramei Simcha and this chiddush or Mishulm David Alevi, who has a beautiful diak in a Tosefta. But at the end of the day, this chakira could be is what's going on over here. What's playing itself out between these two Rashis. The Rashi in zvachim Dav Beis, the Rashi in Menachos Dav Beis, the Doik. But maybe you could say another mahalach. Maybe you could say ubehektem. The Gemara in Masechtas Bava Kama, Daf Daled Amud Beis and Daf Hey Amud Aleph is discussing the Arba Avos Nezikin. Right, so this is one of the few places where Bava Kama meets Kachem. So Masechtas Bava Kama begins Arba Avos Nezikin, Ashar, Habar, Hamav Vahever. We know that the Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Daled Amud Beis brings a brayso for Rabbi Shia that added to that. He said that there were not 4 Avos Nezikin, but there were 13 Avos Nezikin. Then the Gemara brings a brayso for Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia said there weren't 13 Avos Nezikin, there were actually 24 Avos Nezikin. And the Gemara goes and tells us, according to Reb Chia, what all the Chav Daled Avos Nezikin are. Now, Reb Chia, when he said there are 24 Avos Nezikin, so he counted them. And the Gemara says, we know minyana is always asal ma'ute. It's always coming to exclude something. I mean, you only count when there's something that you think should have been included in your ranking on your list that for whatever reason is being excluded. So the Gemara says, as it relates to Reb Chia's Chav Dalit, what's he coming to be Mamayit? I just explained the Gemara about the Kama Abyssal Beser. The Arba Avos Nezikin is coming to be Mamayit, the 13 and the 24. Rav Oshia's 13 is coming to be Mamayit, the Reb Chia's other 11. But Reb Chia, l'chayra, maxed that. He gave you everything. So if Reb Chia covered the whole spectrum, so what is he coming to be Mamai? It's the Gemara minyana the Reb Chia l'mu'utei mai l'mu'utei moiser u'mafakel. He's coming to be Mamai. If someone's a moiser, you would think he should be chayiv, he should be included in the Avos Nezikin, not on my list. Additionally, mefagel. Obviously, between the moiser and the mefagel, which one do we need? We need the mefagel, right? So Reb Chia says the Gemara is telling me the number 24 because he wants you to know that mefagel is not going to be included. What does that even mean? So the background to mefagel is a Mishnah in Perek HaNezakin in Mesechtes Gittin, where the Mishnah says kohanim that had a machshavas pigel while they were doing the avodah. So if they had the machshavah b'meizid, the halach is chayavim. The chayiv as a mazik, and based on that, so I have another example of Avos Nezikin. If somebody would have a machshavas pigel l'chayra, that would come with chiyuv mammon, and based on that, it should be included. Minyana de Reb Chia is lemuute that a mefagel is not going to be included in the list. And the Gemara says, why takana? Why not? I mean, it sounds like he should be included in the list. The Gemara says, bekachim like kamayri, because bavakam is not kachim, very much not, and as a result, we're not talking about kachim. The kachim the gazachin we'll deal with when we learn kachim. But bekachim like kamayri and bavakama, and it's for that reason it's not included. Rashi, on the word of the Gemara umefagel, says something that is very hard to even say over with a straight face. Right? This mamash goes down as one of the most shver Rashis of all time. Rashi says, what does it mean, mefagel? Koyin sheshachat karbani shel Yisrael. A koyin that took the carbon of Yisrael and he shechted it, chatos l'shum shlama. And he was bringing a chatos, and instead of a chatos, he had in mind a shlama. Is that what a mefagel is? A mefagel is when you have in mind to do an achila chutz l'zman or chutz l'mkaimai. Rashi didn't teach mefagel as what we know as pigel. Rashi taught it as shaloi l'shma. The kamet kumas in the shtabra, we have several raid bites. Mamish going back to the beginning of time to try to be miyashiv. This very, very shver. Rashi, the Pnei Shua, is very matmiya on this. And other gedolei achronim were very bothered. Rashi, l'chayr, was tar b'dvar mishnah. Rashi, mamish, made the most basic error, it sounds like. He's teaching mefagel as really being shaloi l'shma. So the Chasam Sofer, in Bava Kama Daf Hey Amud Aleph, he says a davar nifla. He says, Lulei de mistafina, I want to say maybe a little bit of a pshat in Rashi. And that is, Avada Rashi is being moitzi mefagel midei pshutei. Rashi knows what pigel is, Rashi knows what shaloi l'shma is, right? And Rashi's purposely teaching pigel not as pigel, but rather as shaloi l'shma. But there was a reason for it. And the reason is because Be'etzim said the Chasam Sofer, I don't even understand how it's possible that the Mishnah could say that kohanim that had a machshavas pigel, the halacha is that they're going to be chayiv mammon. The Gemara says in Bava Kama Daf Chav Tes Amud Beis that if someone has a machshava hapiselis bekachim, the halacha is that he gets malchus. Now we know the rule is that a person is never loiko mishalim. How could it be that kohanim that were mefagel b'mezid are going to be chayiv mammon to the extent that they get malchus based on the lav of lo yachshev? The Gemara in Zvachim Chav Tes Amud Beis, you have a kamle b'derabim issue. So now already it's eino loiko mishalim. Kedei rishas liksiv. So if there's eino loiko mishalim, so based on that, l'chayra, there should be no chiyuv mammon. So Stam is like the whole conversation in the Mishnah in Gittin, and the Gemara is saying l'mute mefagel. To me, this whole thing is a davar pel. Said the Chasam Sofer, I know what you're going to probably tell me. You'll tell me anachinami. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that holds lav she'ein by ma'isa loikin olav, which the Gemara said in Zvachim Chav Tes Amud Beis, is the one that holds that a mechashev bekachim is going to be loika. It's true, you're not going to pay mammon. You're going to get malchus. You're not going to get mammon because you ain't a loika mishale. When the Mishnah says in Gittin that the Kohanim that were mefagel b'meizid have a chiyuv mammon. And when the Gemara says in Bava Kama Daf Hey Amud Aleph mutei mefagel, and the Gemara says adarabba, because Bekachim like Kamayri, we're all going in the world of the Chachamim. Because in the world of the Chachamim there is no Malkus, because it's a lav shein by Maisa. So if there's no Malkus, Meil is going to be chiyuv mammon. So it's a very obvious response, right? But at the same time, it doesn't work. You know why? Because if you go through the Gemara in Bava Kama, the Gemara makes a certain klalim, certain rules, as it relates to what is included in the Arba Avos Nizikin, and then in the Shloisha Asa Avos Nizikin, and then later in the Arba Asa, the Arba Ve'esrim Avos Nizikin. And one of the rules is Beplukta Loi Kamayri. All of these things were things that had to work Aliba the Kuliyama, which means that why, if the Gemara was entertaining to say that a mefagel is one of the Avos Nazikin, that means it would be true aliba the kuliyama. Not only according to the Chachamim that hold lav she'ein by Maisa ain't like an olive, but even according to Rabbi Yehuda that holds lav she'ein by Maisa is yes like an olive. Well, if that's the case, freik the heilige Chassam Sofer, then how could the Gemara entertain that you should be chayav mamin by being mefagel aliba the Chachamim? Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda that holds lav shein b'maisa like an olav. L'chayra, if lav shein b'maisa like an olav, you're going to get malchus. Once you're going to get malchus, you can't have a chiyuv mammon because you ain't like a mashalim. And you can't tell me that the Gemara wasn't cheshbening in Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara was only cheshbening in the Chachamim because beplukta like Kamayri. And the Gemara didn't say lemute mefagel because beplukta like Kamayri. The Gemara said because bekachim like Kamayri, which means that really it meets all the aforementioned criteria. It stims, it conforms with beplukta like Kamayri. That means when the Gemara wants mefagel, the Gemara means that I'll leave it to Kuliyam. Zok Tichsam Sofer. This is what was bothering Rashi. Right? In the Chumash, we always talk about what's bothering Rashi. This is what was bothering Rashi. Rashi had gegangen and leben this kasha. He couldn't understand that the Gemara over here is handling that you should be chayiv mammon for pigel, even I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. What happened to the fact he ain't like a mashal? So you know what? You know what Rashi said? That mefagel must mean not mefagel. You know what mefagel must mean shaloi l'shma. And shaloi l'shma didn't bother Rashi. And the Chassam Sofer says, you know why? I'll tell you a chiddush, your hair is going to stand up. The reason is because even though it says in the Torah, lo yachshev, and the Gemara learns from there that if someone has a bad machshava bekachim, you're going to get malchus. But lo yachshev is only true by a machshavas pigel. But a machshava shaloi l'shma is not included in lo yachshev. And the Chassam Sofer says, haga ba'atzmecha. Where does it say the word lo yachshev? It says it in the pasuk of pigel. That's where it says it. So really, based on that, ein l'chaba el chidushay. Truth is another makar. There's another makar to Machshavas Pigel. We're going to talk about this Be'ez Hashem in the next few days. It's a pasuk of Parsha Shoftim. L'sizbach l'Hashem alekecha shoy v'seh sheyeh by mum kol davar ra ki toyev as Hashem alekechahu. And Rashi quotes this free. What does it mean? Don't shech kol davar ra. Azara lemefagel bekotshim al yedei dibur ra. It's an azara that you're not allowed to have a Machshavas Pigel. And the Chassam Sofer says if you look up this free innovating, this free keeps on saying pigel, pigel, pigel. Why does it keep on saying pigel? Because the only time you're over a lav when it comes to kachim is if the machshava is a machshavas pigel. If, however, the machshava would be a machshava shaloi l'shma, over there not. Says the Chassam Sofer, that's why Rashi said mefagel means shaloi l'shma. Because Rashi was trying to get at it as kasha, that how can it be aliba de Rabbi Yehuda, you would be chayiv mammon. Rabbi Yehuda holds you get malchus for lo yichashev, and you're ein aloiku meshale. Says the Chassam Sofer, that's why Rashi said that mefagel doesn't mean pigel, but rather mefagel means shaloi l'shma. If mefagel means shaloi l'shma, by shaloi l'shma there's no lav of lo yichashev. If there's no lav of lo yichashev, there's no problem. Vein eloikum meshalem. Therefore, there's a sugi over here of whether mefagel is in the Avos Nazikin. It's not included in the Avos Nazikin. Truth is, this Chassam Sofer, which is in Bava Kama, Daf Hey Amud Aleph, is more ba'arichos in a tshuva. The tshuva is in Chayshim Mishpasim in Reish Daled. It was written to the great Goyin, Rab David Deitch. It's a very kachrim diga tshuva. It's very much related to this inyan that we're discussing right now. And over there he says this inyan ba'arichos, that he always held that it could be that the lav of lo yichashiv is not something that would apply to a machshava shloi l'shma. The lav of lo yichashiv is something that would only apply where? It would only apply to a machshavas pigel, but not by the machshava l'shaloi l'shma. But the bottom line is, if we have a Chassam Sofer, we learned it up in a Rashi in Bava Kama Daf Hey Amud Aleph, and the Chassam Sofer didn't just say it fleetingly, he says it by richos, and he bangs it out in that tshuva Chayshim Mishpatim in Reish Dalet. That could be this no lav of lo yichashev when it comes to machshava shaloi l'shma. So that would be another yishuv hagen to Rashi and Menachas that beis amid beis. Rashi says, "Unadava mishari l'shnuye." Right? Are you allowed to have a machshava shaloi l'shma? It says Zevach Shlomim Karbonoi Shetezvich L'Shem Shlomim. Rashi is saying, good, you should have said better. You should have said what you yourself said one Masech ago in Zvachim that base. It's not Lo Yichashev. The teretz is Rashi in Zvachim obviously holds Lo Yichashev passes even for a Machshava Shaloi L'Shma. But Rashi Menachos holds that it doesn't pass Shaloi L'Shma. Again, we're not being Miyashiv the Steers Rashi. We're just coming to say a Mahalach in what the shaila might be, whether it's out Tzloyi Chachnev or whether it's out from Zevach Shalom Karbonoi, and specifically Rashi and Menachos, like we mentioned in the beginning of this, is all of Lavi Araya. Why would he not explain it based on Loyi Chachnev? Why would he explain it better? Why would he explain it better based on Zevach Shalom Karbonoi? The first mahalach was that it's based on the fact that it could be when it comes to a carbon where it's not going to be possible the Machshava Shaloi L'Shma. Over there, there's no problem of Loyi Chachnev, like Ramei Simcha was medayik milashoni azav shalai Rambam in Hilchas Psula Hamikdash Perik Ches Halacha Aleph, and like Ramei Shalom David Alevi was moichiach or medayik, a little more than a diak maybe, from the Tosefta and the end of Perik Yubez of Masechtas Vachim. The second mahalach is that it could be not only is there no lo yichashev when it comes to the shaloi l'shmas that are kosher v'lei olul b'ayim l'shem chayva. There's never lo yichashev when it comes to machshava shaloi l'shma. Even by the Pesach and the Chatas, right? It's not mefurish anywhere. If someone has a bad machshava, Zochtich Sam Sofer, lulei de mistafina, maybe you could say it's only going to be true by machshava spekel, but just to end. And that is, so the Chassam Sofer just said a very big chiddush, right? He just said that if somebody would have a machshava shaloi l'shma, by all kachim, he would not be over the lav of lo yichashev. Sounds like a chiddush, right? Could be this is what's going on in between these two Rashis, Rashi in Zvachim daf beis and Rashi in Menachos daf beis. What should that shaila be tali in? What should it be tali in? Whether there's a lav of lo yichashev by machshava shaloi l'shma or not. This is easy. It should be tali in the brisker Rav. It should be tali in the brisker Rav with the Hey Hayediyah that we also spoke about so many times. And that is, the brisker Rav was mechadish without going through the whole arichas. That portion you learn that the reason a machshava shaloi l'shma has a negative impact on a carbon is because a carbon has to be l'shma. Based on all the limudim, a carbon has to be l'shma. When you're mechashev shaloi l'shma, you took away the l'shma. Memela it's possible because it's chassid l'shma. But the brisker Rav was mechadish that really you can never take away the l'shma of a carbon, because stam l'shma is a chalois in the carbon, and a carbon is always l'shma based on the sugya of stam l'shma. Right before we knew stam l'shma maybe, but once you know stam l'shma at that point you can never take away the l'shma of a carbon. Why then is it that a machshava shaloi l'shma has a negative impact on a carbon? It's a machshava apiseles lo yishna from a machshavas chutz l'zmanei or chutz l'mkoimai or one of the other machshavas hapoislis and kachim. There's an inyan that a bad machshava can have a negative impact on a carbon, and that's the yisoid of a machshava shaloi l'shma having a negative impact on a carbon. If you hold that the yisoid of shaloi l'shma is that it's a negative machshava that passes a carbon, just like a machshavas pigel, then it's pashut, it should be included in lo yichashev, in the lamda shabbat. If, however, the yisoid of every machshava shaloi l'shma is not your positive machshava had a negative impact on a carbon, but rather when you have a machshava shaloi l'shma, what you're doing is you're removing the l'shma and the memela the carbon is being pasul. If that's the case, it's pashut. It doesn't pass lo yichashev. Lo yichashev means don't have a machshava that's going to negatively impact the carbon. I just explained, even though when you have the bad machshava and you remove the lishma, the carbon is pasul, but it's not pasul machmas the machshava. Punkt. The way it became pasul was al yedei machshava. The machshava was the grama. It's not the chefza of the iser. It's pasul also felt in lishma. It's chasal lishma. That's why it's pasul. You want to know how it became chasal lishma? Through a bad machshava. That's not lo yichashev. Lo yichashev means don't have a machshava that's the chefza being mafsed the kachem. L'chayr, this is chakira. Whether or not there should be a lo yichashev when it comes to machshava shaloi l'shma should be totally in the chakira hayudu of the brisker Rav, which would mean that maybe these two Rashis in Zvachim da Beis and Menachos da Beis, this is what's going on over here. Again, this is all being said lepopula ba'alma. I'll just be ma'ira one ha'ara before the Olam calls me out on this, and that is that the truth is if you look weiter in Rashi here Menachos da Beis amid Beis, so it's dibur hamaschal Rashi's kan b'shinui mechti machshava de pasal rachmana b'mincha hakeshahu. So in the middle of the cheshbon of the Gemara, just to read Rashi's words. Rashi says like this: how do you know that there's a psul machshava shalei l'shma by menachis? It's going in Shitas Reb Shimon from the beginning of the Masechta. We learn it kechatas kashim, right? We learn it from a hekish from zvachim. Okay, this geshrachmana mincha l'zvachim kidechsiv kodesh kadashim he kechatas ukashim and ma zvachim pasla b'machshava. And if that's the case, Rashi seems to be saying that the reason a machshava passes, he's talking not about the lav, he's talking about it passing, but the reason it passes is because it says in the Torah, this is Rashi in Menachos Tapez on the base, who's telling to lo yichashev to explain the inyan of a machshava shlei l'shma passing a carbon. We were learning up in the top Rashi of Menachos Tapez on the base. Rashi said, "When Udava Mishari l'shnuyei v'aksivim zevach shlomim karbonoi sheteisvich l'shleim shlomim." That Rashi is not bringing lo yichashev into the sugya because lo yichashev maybe has no makom, at least in the second mahalach, has no makom b'chlal when it comes to a machshava shlei l'shma. Well, Rashi behemshach diyom clearly brought in lo yichashev not for the lav, but albeit for the psul. In fact, the Brisker Rav in his piece, when he brings rayas to his yisoid that machshava shlei l'shma is a machshava apiselis, one of his mar mekaymas that he quotes is this Rashi on the bottom of Menachos Beis on the base. So the Brisker Rav brought a raya from Menachos Tap Beis on the base, not the top Rashi, because I think the top Rashi sounds like a kasha on the Brisker Rav. He brought a raya from the bottom Rashi, which would then mean we would have to try to reconcile these Rashis. Again, the Indian over here is just to be mafalful a little bit in two Rashis, that we have a yisoid, and that is shaloi l'shma is not only a psul, it's not only a question, is it kosher, is it puzzle, is it alul l'bayim l'shem chayva, is it not alul l'bayim l'shem chayva, but the sugi of shaloi l'shma is a question of isser v'het as well. What is the makar to this isser? First glance is a steers Rashi. Rashi's vachim beis amad beis says lo yichashev. Rashi Menachos brings the whole sugya of the first parak of Masechtas vachim im zevach shlomim karbonai. It sounds like Rashi didn't want lo yichashev, which is the more obvious makar. Of course lo yichashev. Mefurish Gemara zvachim chavtas amad beis. You get malchus al libid Rabbi Yehuda. That's of course what Rashi should have said. Why did Rashi not say it? We're being matzia again. Pashit for conversation purposes. Lepilpul ba'alma two mahalchim. One based on the yisoid from Ramei Simcha and the yisoid from Shalom David Alevi, and that is it could be the only time there's a psul machshava shaloi. The only time there's a isser, a lav of lo yichashev, is when the carbon is going to be puzzled. Over here we're discussing kashav alei alul daim l'shem chayva. But it's still also l'shnuye. We're handling something that shaloi l'shma is kosher. So over there it doesn't pass to say lo yichashev. Inami, like the Sam Soif's big yisoid that he says in Bava Kama Daf Hey, and he says in Chuvas and Chayshim Mishpasim Reish Daled, that it could be there is no din lo yichashev b'chlal. There's no din lo yichashev b'chlal when it comes to a psul shaloi l'shma. What would that be tali and the chayr be tali in the Brisker Rav's Chakira? The issue is there's a Rashi on the bottom of Beis and Beis that seems to shtautu lo yichashev mefurish to shaloi l'shma. And by the way, this Rashi on the bottom of Menachos Beis, Amud Beis, and also the Rashi in Zvachim that Beis Amud Beis are both the others on the Chasam Sofer, because the Chasam Sofer is saying that lo yichashev is not related b'chlal to shaloi l'shma. What do you mean? I have a Rashi on the first daf of the first two Masechtas of Kashim that seem to say not that way. This Rashi maybe can be mechal between the psul and the lav. Rashi in Zvachim Beis Amud Beis is talking about the lav, and he says before is lo yichashev when it comes to shaloi l'shma. Again, tein l'chachim yech gemoed v'sulei midi.